Alright, so in this third video, Perseus has defeated Medusa, beheaded her, and is now heading home to the island of Seriphos with his prize that he has promised to King Polydectes. Now, while Perseus was busy doing all of that, in another location, we had some other type of drama going on. Alright, so Queen Cassiopeia, this is her name right here. All right. Queen Cassiopeia makes, that's a better way of putting it, makes a foolish boast, and she says that either she, or in other versions, her daughter Andromeda, or perhaps both in other versions, was more beautiful than all of the Nereids, the 50 mermaid daughters of the god Nereus, if you remember them. And so, this insults the Nereids, and they go to Poseidon to ask for, or to seek retribution for their insult. And so Poseidon avenges the Nereids by flooding his kingdom, by flooding King Cepheus, King Cepheus's kingdom, and he sends a monster called the Kraken to destroy his kingdom. And I'm sorry, I just got caught up in thinking about that whole release the Kraken thing from the movies. So anyway, it's pretty cool if you watch the old Clash of the Titans and the new version, because they have very different depictions of the Kraken. The old one is pretty funny. He's got like really good abs, and in the new one he kind of just looks like a big slimy booger with tentacles or something like that. But anyway, it's pretty cool, okay? Now, an oracle tells the king that although the flooding has been damaging, it's not as bad as what the sea monster would wreak on them, okay? And so, an oracle tells the king that if they offer his daughter Andromeda as a sacrifice to the sea monster, the kingdom and his people would be saved. And so Andromeda is chained to a rock and offered up as a sacrifice to the Kraken. It's at this particular point that Perseus flies overhead with his winged sandals, and he spots this beautiful young woman chained to a rock about to be devoured by a sea monster, and he falls in love with her. He goes to the king. Apparently there's a little time to play around with here. He goes to the king and he offers to kill the monster for Andromeda's hand in marriage. So remember, our heroes are oftentimes rewarded for their acts. That's one of the motifs. Now, the king agrees, and Perseus kills the Kraken with Medusa's head. He turns it to stone. But there is opposition to Perseus's reward in the form of Phineus. Phineus is his Andromeda's fiance, and he's like, hold up, I'm supposed to marry her. So Perseus takes care of his Phineus problem by using Medusa's head to turn him to stone. If you're keeping track, Perseus has used the head now twice. Once on the Kraken, once on poor Phineus, the fiancé. So he is able to marry Andromeda once his opposition is taken care of. So again, the motif of marriage is his main reward. He marries Princess Andromeda, and the whole lot of them are rewarded for their heroism in their story by being transformed into constellations at the end of their lives. Cassiopeia, Andromeda, Perseus, all of them. You can find them in the stars. Now there are a few other adventures on the way home. And Some of these will be a little bit contradictory to what you hear with Heracles, but I want you to keep in mind that Perseus is a pretty big hero. He has got pretty big shoes to fill. So Heracles, some of the elements of his story are really meant to mimic his ancestors' story, to make him as great as, even better than Perseus. Okay, so traveling back to Seriphos, as Perseus is flying over Libya, blood starts to seep out of the seams of this enchanted pouch, the kibisis, and drops onto the ground in Libya. And wherever the blood drops, snakes appear. And so that is an etiological explanation for why Libya has so many poisonous snakes. I've had a couple of Australian students in the past. When we got to this part of the story, they were like, so did Perseus fly over Australia too? Because they got lots of poisonous everything. But anyway, that's the story of the snakes in Libya. At another point, Perseus runs into Atlas. Atlas is, of course, remember the guy who's holding up the horizon. And so he uses Medusa's head to turn Atlas into stone. Why? I don't know. He used it on Phineas. Maybe he just becomes a jerk. So that's number 3 victim. Victim number 3 is Atlas. Turns Atlas into stone and he becomes a mountain range known as the Atlas Mountains. This will be problematic with Heracles because Heracles needs some help from Atlas, so I guess we kind of forget about this whole thing eventually. Another etiological story is in the creation of coral, because when the blood from the kibisis drips into the ocean, wherever it lands in the ocean, coral springs out. Okay, so that's the rest of the adventures on the way home to Seriphos, after he's married Andromeda. Once Perseus returns to Seriphos, he discovers that the king, Polydectes, has been very persistent and aggressive in his pursuing of Danae, assuming that Perseus will never return. So Danae has sought shelter in a temple, and Polydectes is not foolish enough to insult the gods or betray the sanctity of their temple. So he figures he will just wait her out, and he tries to force things along a little bit by refusing to have any food available to her in the temple until she gives up and comes out to him. So when Perseus finds out about this, he's very angry, and he avenges his mother by going to King Polydectes in his court and using Medusa to turn the king and all of his subjects into stone. So there's another whole passel of victims of the head of Medusa. Like I said, he gets a lot of use out of that. So once he's killed the king and all of his court, Perseus is kind of in charge. However, it doesn't go over well when you kill the king and then take over. So what Perseus does instead is he rewards his adopted surrogate father, Dectes, that rescued he and his mother from the chest at sea. He rewards Dectes by making him the new king of Seriphos. And at the conclusion of the saga, Perseus will return the enchanted objects to their rightful owners through Hermes. But remember, Hermes is going to wind up keeping most of them. He also thanks Athena for her help in his adventures by giving her the head of Medusa. And if you remember, Athena places the head of Medusa on her shield, the Aegis. Okay? So, what winds up happening with Perseus and Acrisius, Perseus will wind up going to the mainland, going back to the Argos region of Greece. He winds up actually accidentally killing his grandfather in an athletic competition. He kind of throws a javelin wild, and there he goes. He's dead. So the prophecy did come true, and Perseus kind of takes over the Argos region. So, in wrapping up this particular saga, what's important to note is the predominance of folktale motifs. I will go through, there's about 11 of them. I will go through them very, very slowly for you. All right, but before we get into that, also what is interesting and unusual is the interest in the exotic lands outside of Greece. So yes, there may be journeys to the underworld, but there are not that many journeys to actual places outside of Greece. And of course, we can see that this myth had a huge impact on those regions, especially in Egypt, where one of their major goddesses has her origin story in this saga. Io becomes Isis. There are a lot of etiological and historical implications to the myth. Again, the snakes in Libya, the Atlas mountain ranges, right? The invention of coral. All of those things are very, very important and very etiological, or explaining the natural world. And again, Perseus gives the kingdom of Seriphos to Dictys. And Perseus becomes the first king of Tiryns and the founder of Mycenae in the region of Argos. Now remember, because Perseus killed King Polydectes, he can't rule there. And so, because Perseus becomes the king of Mycenae, or Mycenae, all the kings of Mycenae trace back to Perseus. Okay, so back to these folktale motifs. If you need to pause to write these down, these are all important. Okay, number 1, folktale motif, the amazing birth. He is born from a golden shower that Zeus rains down upon Danae. Number 1, amazing birth. Number 2, the motif of discovery. The child is born and is hidden, but King Acrisius discovers them. Number 3, early challenges. He's launched onto the sea in a locked chest with his mother. Number 4, villainous family members, or somewhat family members, okay? The villainous king Polydectes and his good brother Dictys, the surrogate father of Perseus. Oh, I forgot to mention that. Sorry about that. Yeah, that's the other reason why Dictys becomes the king of Seriphos. All right. Number 5, the defending of the mother's honor. Number 6, the rash statement of the hero. I could just as easily get you the head of Medusa as I can bring you a horse. Remember that? Number 7, the meant to be fatal quest, right? The insuperable task. Number 8, supernatural aid. 2 gods this time help our hero, Hermes and Athena. 9, the use of magical objects. 10, monsters. We have the Grey, we have the Gorgons and Medusa, we have a Kraken. Lots of monsters in this particular story. And number 11, the vindication of the hero against the villains that are against him and his family. All right, and that is the end of the saga of Perseus, but not the end of the Argive saga, because in our next series of videos, we will get into Heracles, and remember, your next quiz will be over Perseus and Heracles. All right, so I'll catch you later in the video, in Heracles' video. All right, talk to you soon.